Hi, I'm Asa. I'm a tutor at MSSU. And through my experience, I'm just going to show you guys some of what I've seen with visual learners. I myself am a visual learner, and here's a few of the things that I've found through teaching people who are visual learners and being one myself, and also a little bit of research. So without further ado, so what is visual learning? Visual learning is one of the three basic learning styles. There's visual, there's auditory, and kinesthetic. So visual learning, you typically learn through seeing pictures, charts, graphs. These pictures here, that's kind of what you would expect a visual learner to see. So here are some characteristics of visual learners. You don't always see them display all of these, but they might display a couple of them. It's pretty uncommon to see them have all of these because everyone's a little different, but they're usually observant and they remember what they see, and they learn better when visuals are used. They have trouble remembering what might be said. If a teacher says something, they might not remember it. They take notes or draw pictures of concepts they learn in class. They try to picture information in their head. You might see them look up while they're trying to picture something in their head. And then they prefer to draw things too. And then they also might tend to doodle or enjoy art, one of the more artistic types of learning. Here are some common things they might do. They might ask the teacher to slow down when they're explaining something in words because they're trying to build a mental picture of what the teacher is saying to them, and so that their brain might be a little bit behind, and if the teacher starts going too fast, they might have to kind of slow down and take some time to think it through. And then they write down a lot of what they hear so they can see it on paper. Just seeing words does help a visual learner. They might ask the teacher or the tutor to repeat verbal instructions. And then they'll watch procedures of an activity from classmates sometimes and then copy it. They might kind of mimic what their classmates are doing after a teacher might explain it to them because they like to see what other people are doing rather than hearing what the teacher tells them to do. A lot of times they'll lose focus in class or tutoring when the instructor is talking and there aren't any visuals. The irony is that there aren't any really on this PowerPoint, but yeah, they tend to lose focus in class a lot of times and kind of zone out. And then they completely ignore what the instructor might say in lecture sometimes and instead focus on what they show them or the graphs. They might not remember a definition, but they'll remember a relationship between two things shown in a graph or a picture. And then they stare off into space for a moment while they try to picture a concept in their head, as I mentioned earlier. So here are some tips to teach a visual learner. First, slow down. They need a lot more time usually to visualize things, especially if you're not using pictures. It can be hard for them to pick up on audio and construct a visual image. Avoid talking for extended periods of time without a visual. So chances are they need a moment to process, interpret, write down whatever you're saying. Try to use visuals as much as possible. It can include graphs, charts, tables, pictures, anything of that sort. If you can't find any visuals online, try to find a way to draw it for them. And if you can't think of any way to draw it, write down an explanation and break it into baby steps. A lot of complex things can be broken down into smaller parts, and it makes it a lot easier to understand, as you'll see in an example. So here's what it's like to be a confused visual learner. A lot of you guys will learn a lot of the things that you might tutor with ease. So it can be hard to know exactly what it's like to understand a big glob of words, not to understand a big glob of words explaining something difficult. So here's an example. Try to follow along and see how much sense you can make out of what I'm saying. It's a foreign concept to a lot of you guys, so it might provide insight into what it's like. So single bonded sections of molecules are able to freely rotate about the bond and form different shapes due to the sigma bond overlap, whereas double bonded molecules cannot because the unhybridized p orbital overlap locks the bond into place. So to someone familiar with organic chemistry, that's what that is. It makes a lot of sense, but learning it for the first time can be hard. And this is a really easy concept, but it's very difficult to explain. It's easy to show a picture of right here. So you can easily rotate a single bond, but a double bond kind of locks it in like a ladder. You can't rotate a ladder. It's a really easy concept, but it's hard to understand if you're a visual learner because I didn't just show you a picture of it. So that's kind of what it's like. So let's do a scenario. A student is struggling to understand the water cycle. there are too many moving parts for them to picture all at once, and their teacher's explanation is too wordy and confusing. The student says they're a visual learner and need to be able to see what's happening. What do you do? So first, you want to find a picture. If they're a visual learner, you need a picture. Most of the time, it will help a lot. And you can't go wrong finding one on the internet. They're everywhere, the water cycle. But what do you do if the student still does not understand what you're showing them? There are a lot of moving parts in this picture. You know, there's filtration, there's precipitation, evaporation, condensation, runoff. There's a lot of moving parts, and it can be confusing. So here's what you do. You break it into simpler components. So in this picture, we're going to start with evaporation. You start with water, and heat makes it evaporate. So you're just explaining one of the concepts. And then from there, you can continue, say, okay, next is condensation, and you explain it further, but a picture of evaporation and then a picture of condensation, you know, one at a time, baby steps, that'll help a lot. And yeah, so that's some tips for teaching visual learners. I hope that this helps.
Hi guys, my name is Kat and I'm a biology and chemistry tutor here at Southern for the Student Success Center. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about how to study for a science test. So the question I always get asked whenever people come in for tutoring is, how do I study? And that's a really big question because a lot of times whenever we're going through our primary education and even secondary education, we're not taught how to study science. We're taught how to study all kinds of other subjects, vocabulary, English. We're taught how to write, really in depth. But we don't really go over how to study for science. So I'm going to talk to you guys about that today. So the first step whenever you're studying for science starts before you even get to class. You're going to need to pre-read. And whenever you're pre-reading, you need to read the material, and it'll get you familiar with all the terms and main ideas that you're going to go over in the class. If you have time while you're doing this, you can jot down some of the main ideas and the terms so that you can study those later. Maybe make some flashcards or something. But if you're short on time, you can simply read those key terms and the main ideas found in the text. Right here I'm going to show you how to actually read your textbook. This is a textbook. This one right here is on earth science. And right here we can see that textbooks have checkpoints and they have the definitions. The definitions are usually going to be bolded, maybe highlighted. Sometimes they're even like in italics. The checkpoints and these little sections at the end of the smaller sections, they'll review key concepts in each section and give you some questions that you can use. And here's another book. This is another example. And this example has a here's what we know so far section. This here's what we know so far section is the same thing, the same idea as a checkpoint. So another thing that we have to know is whenever you have any formulas, like this right here is your pH formula, and they bring it down over here, and they have some like really key things when you are talking about pH. Those formulas and all these diagrams, if they've taken the time to make a diagram, that's a key concept. That's something that you're going to want to know. Anything that's a scientific law, theory, that's also a key point. So the next thing you're going to do is when you're in class, you need to actively listen. A lot of times whenever you're just sitting in class and you're reading along, maybe you're following along, you're just kind of passively listening. You're not actually processing that information. You're just kind of in one ear, out the other. In order to lock in information, it's really key, it's essential that you practice listening during lecture, that active listening. So ways that you can do this and really focus on doing this is to reduce your distractions. So put down your phone. I know you don't want to. Sometimes I don't want to. But we really need to put down our phones and pay attention. We also need to take notes. This helps keep you focused and it gives you something to go off of later for whenever you're studying. You also, every time that your professor or that there's a diagram in maybe their PowerPoint presentation, you sketch that diagram. If they sketch it, you've got to sketch it. And it doesn't have to be beautiful, trust me. The next step is to really think about it. Take your time, think it through, and if it doesn't make sense to you, don't be afraid to ask questions. This is a really big key point. Don't be afraid to ask a silly question, a stupid question, because if you're wondering it, chances are there's a lot of other people in class wondering it too. Or maybe just the professor or the teacher didn't notice that they might have skipped over or something. Another thing that a lot of us don't consider as students is that our presenters really, they go off of our interaction with them. So giving some nonverbal cues, a little head tilt when you're confused, that'll cue that professor, that teacher in that you're not understanding what's going on. And if you're nodding, they're going to know that they can go ahead and move on to the next section. So the next thing that you can do to really, really help study for a science test is to bring that material to life. Science is the study of the world around you. So not everything has to be just textbook. Get creative. You can do all kinds of things. Make models. This person here made DNA out of some candy. This one made a plant cell out of what looks to be maybe Play-Doh or clay. This is a bacteriophage, and it's just made out of what looks like some craft material. This person is just got where a child has made a little image of the cycle. And taking the time and writing that all out and drawing that really helps you to remember and retain it. You can also, for like ecology and stuff, you can make a diagram. That really helps you focus on, what all is in the ecosystem, what all is tying together. Beyond that, you can also use models. I have right here my model, and I actually used this one for my A&P class. I was having a lot of trouble focusing on, and really retaining what the bones were, what the names of them were, and where each little piece goes. So I went out and I got a model. Now, a lot of schools have models available that you can just use. So go ahead and reach out to your professor, to the tutoring department, or whoever you have in charge there, and see what they have as far as models go, what you could borrow. Okay, so the next step that you're going to do is practice. Practice is key. In order to increase your understanding and your critical thinking skills, you have to practice. So use the review questions provided in the text. Those critical thinking sections that we talked about and looked at earlier? Use those, and in the back of each chapter, there will be a chapter review. In most textbooks, the odd-numbered problems have the answers in the back of the book. That's not for you to cheat, that's for you to practice, because they know you need to do the practice questions. There are a lot of resources available for you to get practice material beyond that. So you can use Khan Academy. This is a really, really great resource. Khan Academy has videos, and they also have quizzes and practice tests. You can also use Quizlet. Not only does Quizlet have like a practice test option, they have flashcards already made up for you, so you don't have to spend your time making flashcards if you don't have a lot of time. Kahoot is another really good one. You can even play that with your friends, or you can play it alone. It's like a game, but with test questions. There's also Chegg Prep. It's a free service from Chegg, and they have all these flashcards available, and unlike Quizlet, most of their flashcards actually have images on them. This is the symbol for Crash Course. Crash Course is an online resource. It is a YouTube channel, and they make a lot of really excellent science videos. They're like little cartoons, so they're pretty cute and easy to follow along. There's also the Amoeba Sisters. They make exclusively science videos, and they're also very cutesy and easy to follow along. There's also book materials, like there's these For Dummies books. The For Dummies books are my personal favorite. I use them for almost every class. And it might say For Dummies, but it's just a really great resource. They've got all kinds of example questions and review questions. There's also quick review guides. These are from Cliff Notes, and they go through the material a lot faster than the For Dummies books. And for those of you who are more artistic, they have coloring workbooks. These are like coloring sheets, except about some complicated information. I used one for anatomy and used one for biology. And this right here is a link, and you can go to this link and it gives you a list of a bunch of different resources, and it also has, what grades they're for, and it will also tell you whether it's a free resource or whether it's a paid resource. So, really big point is don't look at your notes when you're doing your review questions. I know it's really tempting, but why? Because guys, your brain is lazy. If your material is sitting right here, your brain isn't going to want to think about it. It's just going to really quickly glance down and you're like, oh yeah, I knew that. But your brain might just be being lazy and fooling you. So you got to put those away and do your review questions, and don't give your brain a chance to be lazy. So the last step whenever you're studying is to explain the topic to someone else. Albert Einstein said that if you can't explain it simply, you just don't understand it well enough. So whenever you thoroughly understand a topic, you should be able to simply explain it to someone. I take the time in my studies to explain it to my 4-year-old. And, she might not understand it fully, but it helps me a lot. The last thing is just do your best, guys. That's all that anybody can ever ask from you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter Bledsoe, and I am a student here at Missouri Southern. I'm a secondary education major with a focus in English, and I'm also a writing tutor at the Student Success Center. Today, I'm going to walk with you a few strategies that we have here at Missouri Southern to help you help your 2Ds. These include ideas like introducing yourself and being supportive and sensitive. And then I'll also explain more specific tips that you can use while you're working with your 2Ds. So let's begin. First, you want to introduce yourself to your 2Ds. Your peers are going to be very nervous walking into this session. They may also think that it is a bad experience. However, if you introduce yourself and maybe even tell them a little bit about yourself, you can end up breaking down that wall between you and them and allowing them to be more forthcoming about any issues they have in their classes. The next point ties in pretty well, and it's being supportive and sensitive to their needs. They, again, may think that they are bad students, or that if they're having to come to these lessons each time, that there is something wrong with the way that they're learning. And if you're able to meet them halfway and maybe even explain to them any difficulties you had in the subject, they, again, may be more forthcoming and work with you a little bit with that. Then you want to start getting into the nitty-gritty of it. You may ask them for maybe some paper or the requirements that the instructors have given them about the assignment. This is especially useful if you have a rubric, because in that way, you can have them look at the rubric and tell you what it is that that instructor is requiring. That way you can see what they know about the assignments and work from there. Then you will want to lead them through a path of understanding. Let them lead the session. You do not want to be talking the majority of the time. This is a session for them to figure things out. You can do this and instill this kind of rapport by having them answer questions that are not just a yes or no question. Have them elaborate on different aspects of the assignment. And then finally for this section, you may want to have, you will not want to give them the answers directly. This is because if you're giving them answers directly, they're not learning. They will not be able to make those connections later on. They will just have those answers for the moment. So teach them the steps to get to that answer. and then you'll have a tutee that is truly learning from your tutoring experiences. And now I want to talk to you about a few tips we have here at Missouri Southern, specifically in the tutoring department, about how you can help your peers. One way is that you want to choose a section from the writing. You don't want to go through and read the whole paper, because imagine how it must be for them, especially if it is upwards of 5 pages of work. Pick a section that you think is especially needing some work on, and work on the content and the organization. And you can even get into the grammar if you really think that's something that needs to be worked on. You can even have your students or your peers read aloud. When you're reading aloud, you can more often pick up things that you believe or that they believe is wrong than when they're writing it. It sounds more fluid when they're speaking. So in that way, if you have them reading their work out loud, they can get a clearer sense of what needs to be changed about their papers. Then, if you want to talk about specific techniques or specific aspects of a paper, let's say, for example, they don't know the difference between active voice and passive voice. You can go ahead and create sample sentences for them and ask them to work through those sentences and define what needs to be changed. That way, it's not you telling them the answer, it's them learning the answer. So I want to thank you for watching this video. The fact that you're already here watching this video tells me that you are committed to making sure that your peers are learning. So hopefully with everything that you've learned right now, you can go out there and make the change that you want to change in your school. Thank you. Happy tutoring.